Hello and welcome back to Logical Magic Examining Esoterica. Hey guys, today I have a subject and a guest on for you who's really going to help you understand one of the ways to manage something called triggers. As everybody knows, I help people recover from post-traumatic stress disorder, complex post-traumatic stress disorder, and long-term abuse. Now, when we get into a managed state with this particular condition or disorder, you have to have a way of anchoring yourself and avoiding the emotional triggers that can really derail someone's recovery. Now, if you're actively recovering from trauma, you have to do the healing first, but then when you're moving into the management state, my guest today, Dennis J. Henson, has written a book called The Real Impact Daily Inspiration. It's actually about daily reading. And reading, having a focus tool, is one of the best ways to derail triggers. Now, you can't do it when you're in active recovery, when you're still processing pain, but as a management technique, learning new things can be incredibly effective in taking out a trigger. And then he also has a background in being an entrepreneur. He founded the Vanguard Marketing and Investment real estate group, which I've actually been aware of for a very, very long time. A long time ago, I worked as a receptionist for a mortgage company, and I used to talk to people from Vanguard all the time, as they would call in. So when I saw this in his bio, I was like, oh, I'm already familiar with this person. So he's been in real estate investment, and now he has moved towards helping to inspire people towards their own successful life. In fact, he's working on a book called The 7 Secrets of Success. But today we're talking about daily reading, how it impacts your life, and how to develop the habit. And his book addresses that, but we're going to talk to Dennis a little bit about that too. Dennis, hello, how are you?
I'm great. How are you today?
I'm doing so well. I'm so glad you could join me, and thank you for sharing your interests with us and your work with us. So can you talk a little bit about your background and what led you to writing this book?
Sure. Well, many, many years ago, in another life, I was a band director. I have a master's degree in music education. And at one point, I decided to leave band directing and go into sales because it was a great opportunity at the time. So when I went into sales, the company that I went to work for gave me 3 books. They gave me Think and Grow Rich, Success, the Glenn Bland Method, The Greatest Salesman in the World. And when I finished reading those books, it just really changed the focus of my life. I was really excited. So I went out and started doing sales, and I did really well. I was able to buy a new home. I bought a Mercedes Benz. I had all the toys that anybody would ever want to have as a young man. So many, many years later, fast forward to about 5 or 6 years ago, I had been in real estate for a number of years and had taught a number of people real estate investing. And so someone invited me on a podcast just like this. And they asked me, your students are some of the most successful in Texas. If there was just one thing that you could tell my audience, what's the one thing that you tell your students that you can credit their success to? What would that be? And I said, well, if they can change their habits to success habits, they'll become successful. And then they asked me the question, what is the number one success habit? And I said, well, form the habit of reading something positive toward your goal every single day. If you would do that, it will change your life. So after the podcast was finished, I thought, that was the right answer. I know that was a good answer. Wouldn't it be great if someone came up with an app or a book or something to use as a tool to form that habit of reading every day? And then, bam, it hit me. It was like a bolt of lightning. It almost knocked me down. I thought, oh, I can do this. I've been collecting quotes for 50 years. I've been collecting poems and short stories, and I use them in my training. I'll put them together in a book so that people can read in their time slots. They have 2 minutes, they read a quote. If they're at the airport, they've got 30 minutes, I'll give them a list of books. So 5 years later, I thought this is going to take 2 months, but 5 years later, Real Impact was published. And it really works. It really works. It's not only fun to read, it changes your life. And if you go and read some of the reviews, Amazon's wonderful about reviews, but the reviews that really touch my heart are the ones that say, oh, I needed this so much. It came just at the right time. That just makes my heart, flutter, because I love helping people, love to help people.
The acts of service I'm going to tie this to a spirituality concept, which is what you're referring to. Lifelong learning continues to expand your consciousness, which expands your ability to believe in your ability. So that is one of the things that overcomes the fear and anxiety that faces so many people. Because when I talk about PTSD, it's not just for people who have been mugged or assaulted or had long-term abuse in their childhood. A lot of people within the last 5 years have been introduced to the concept that you can work as hard as you can to create a safe structure, but exterior events can come along and kind of, turn over your apple cart. And then your job becomes, how do I rebuild the apple cart? And one of the ways to do that is through faith in oneself, which does involve expanding your consciousness to encompass new ideas, to encompass new information, to find new ways to do things. So everything Dennis is talking about actually has a direct tie to the idea of spiritual awakening, spiritual involvement. And you're even describing the whole thunderbolt hit you like a lightning bolt thing that is called an epiphany in what the kind of work that I do. And helping people in acts of service is one of the easiest ways to start healing your own energy, because it gets you out of your head. So I'm in full agreement with everything that you're saying. And so what happens from there with this?
Well, I had attempted to write in the past. The books were terrible. I actually pulled them off the market because they were just not good. So I spent the next 5 years learning how to write. I learned by reading people who I admired, Og Mandino. I love the way he writes. In his book, The Greatest Salesman in the World, one of the secrets is to form the habit. That's where I learned people are creatures of habit. So that's where I learned to form success habits from that book. In the beginning of the book, he tells a story, though. And in the story, there's a couple of moments there where he reaches into your soul and grabs your heart and squeezes the tears out of your eyes. And I thought, that's it. I mean, if I can write a book where I can reach into people's soul and make them feel what's happening, I think I'll have a success. And so the stories, there's about 40 stories in the book. I had 100 stories to start with, and I really had a difficult time choosing which ones to keep and which ones to let go. The book's the perfect size because I made it that way. If I had put all the stories in there, no one would have been able to afford it. It would have been too expensive and too heavy, and it wouldn't have been the perfect book. But this one is perfect. So one of the
That's actually what kill your darlings means for authors, by the way. Kill your darlings is not kill off characters. It is the process of editing out, because once you put something on the page, it has value to you. And it's so hard to be like, this must go.
Exactly. There's one story in here about Walt Disney, and it builds up to he's doing the first cartoon, full-length movie cartoon, which was Snow White. And his goal was to make people cry by looking at a drawing. And it had never been done in history. And he thought, if the people cry in this part of the movie, I've got a winner. It's going to be a success. And it was. I mean, they cried, and Snow White changed the way that we're still today, 100 years later, the way that we're looking at things.
And that is when you were talking about the idea of successful marketing strategies, that was a successful marketing strategy because think of Dumbo, think of Bambi, think of
Right.
all of these. Like I can't watch Dumbo because it's too emotionally evocative for me. I will end up just, I guess whenever I need a good cry, I could watch Dumbo, but it's so deeply, deeply, deeply sad. But to have emotional access to someone's world is to be able to start changing their world as well. So everything that you're talking about also has a very sound basis in psychological theory about what motivates us towards change and growth.
Yes.
Are there any other stories in there that touched you personally that helped transform your world? The things that went into it have to have personal meaning to you. So could you share another instance that had some personal meaning for you?
Well, okay. The book, the book is kind of a culmination of everything that's happened to me over my life. And I realized at one point, I don't know, you mentioned the seven secrets. I wrote the seven secrets because when I was a young man, when I was in school, in high school, I was in Alabama, and the only thing I cared about in high school was football. I hated class. I didn't like the teachers. I didn't like being locked in a room for an hour. I watched the clock the whole time. I didn't want to go. I told my mother I was sick and get to stay home. So consequently, I had terrible grades. I was, at F's and D's, and it wasn't fun. And so the day that football opened up, that I was able to go out and play football, I went out and I went out for football. I got my helmet. I went out on the field, and as we were standing out there, I looked over on the sidelines and I saw something that was really, really strange. My father was over there next to the coach, and I thought, there's something really going on here. So I walked over there, and my father took the helmet off and handed it to the coach, and he grabbed me by the arm, and we went home because I only weighed 80 pounds. And he says, "You'll get killed, and I'm not going to let you do it." So I couldn't play football. That was my love, that was my life. So I joined the band and played the drums. And so my band director sent me to music camp, and I saw that there was a whole world of drums that I didn't know about. I mean, my goodness, they were playing these drum rudiments, and they were playing these Downfall of Paris, all of these different things. And then they had these drum and bugle corps records. And oh my God, I've got to learn these rudiments. So I went home and I learned to read and learned to play the drum rudiments. And so one day, a college band came in, and they had their symphonic band, and they were going to play. And I thought, oh, this is great. I don't have to go to class. I get to, watch the band. I didn't particularly care for the music they were playing, but I didn't have to be in class, and it was fine. At the end of the concert, the band director turned around and said, "Well, I brought a little treat for you. I brought my marching drum section, and they're going to put on a little show." Now, this was in an auditorium. They went out in the middle of the auditorium on the basketball court, and they put on sunglasses, and they strapped on their drums, and they started playing and dancing. And boy, I mean, my whole brain just exploded. There was a TV commercial a few years ago with a person walking down the street and his head exploded. It was blue. I thought, that's what happened to me. So after that, I went to my band director and I said, "I've got to be in that group. I've got to. What do I have to do?" And he said, "Well, you have to bring your grades up because they're not going to let you in college with your grades. You're going to fail high school." So for the next 3 years, I took my books home. I did my homework. I went and talked to the teacher. I did whatever I had to do because I was going to be in that drum section. And it's a long story, but I got in, I went to college, I came early, I sprained my ankle really bad. I hurt it really bad. And by the time I got to the band, they'd already picked the drums. And so I didn't get to be in the drum section my first year. I had to play a trumpet. And so I was the only alternate in the band. But I didn't let that stop me. I got up and I met the people in the drum section. I learned all the parts. The next year, I went from not getting in the section to being assistant section leader, where I was in charge of the second part. There's the snares, and then there's everybody else, and I was in charge of that. And the following year, I was the section leader. So inspiration and having something in front of you that you really care about is a life-changing event. You know, I would have never gone to college. I didn't care about college. I had never thought of going to college unless I could play football, but of course I couldn't do that. So that experience is the 7 secrets. You know, you get your mind right, you seek wisdom, you develop skills, you form great alliances, you do all of the 7 things, and it gets you wherever it is you want to go. And I think that is true. My father was a disabled veteran who was hurt really bad in World War II, and he had PTSD.
Yeah.
Well, he was very nervous and very difficult to get along with.
Can
And
I ask if he was in the Pacific or in the European theater?
European.
Okay.
Yeah, he was injured near Paris. He was hurt. I mean, he was really hurt, really, really bad. And it's understandable that he was in bad shape when he came back. He saw a lot of things that people don't need to see.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that made my childhood very difficult. And having something like this to look forward to relieved the pain. You know, it made it wonderful because I knew I was going to be in that drum section. I have pictures when I do when I tell the story. I have a slideshow and it shows me in the drum section in my uniform, and oh, that's one proud person right there, because I've worked so hard to be able to do that. And back then, I'm from a little town in Northeast Alabama. Most of the people in Center didn't go to college. It was a big deal. The people that I knew who had gone to college were people who I really admired. And when the teachers heard that I was planning to go to college, they laughed.
Oh, wow.
They thought that was hilarious because I was a D and F student. And they thought, he thinks he's going to college. You know, that was kind of a joke to them. But I showed them, you know, I did it anyway.
You're describing overcoming generational trauma with your father is completely understandable. He would have had something called CPTSD, which is complex post-traumatic stress disorder, that results in people who are in often life-threatening situations or long-term situations from which there is no true escape. And it creates something called generational trauma. And so one of the things that we're tying this back into why this is so good for people with the various forms of a need to recover from trauma or overcome anxiety and fear. Several of the things you're describing are you did not let obstacles deter you. You were able to kind of bend like the reed. When you couldn't play football, even though it was the first thing that lit up your personal universe, you went towards the next thing that played more into your actual strengths. Whereas the barrier that was put in place, so they're always like, hey, rejection is divine protection. You were not meant to play football, but then you found your creative gift and you weren't also deterred when it wasn't immediately successful. And this is another thing on the road to any form of emotional recovery, is being able to recognize the worth of perseverance, because you worked so hard for absolutely everything that you achieved. And it sounds very much like it provided you with a joy that was not present in your difficult childhood, because your father was badly damaged in a time where there wasn't a great deal of understanding of the long-term impacts of trauma. So you carved your path out before people even understood that there was a problem to carve a path out from. So that's highly, highly commendable. And again, in spirituality, that is part of enlightenment and alignment. So
you mentioned the seventh secret is persistence. You mentioned that. That's good.
not being deterred. And
Right.
it's when if you go through college, you've been in the band, you've found that you can succeed. And I absolutely loved that you showed the shaming educators of your particular small town. It's like, no, if you set your mind to it, you can do it. that you can do it. When you really, really want something and you have the gift for it, you can keep going towards it. But it's very important to recognize the roadblocks as being like, okay, I couldn't get it immediately, because that which we achieve easily has less value to us. That is part of the reason that perseverance is such a gift. What happens after that?
Well, it's funny, this is not what I normally mention, but at some point I stayed in college for 5 years because I was only there to be in the band. It never crossed my mind to graduate, that's what I was going to do. So one day they called me into the education department and they said, Mr. Henson, we've been going over your paperwork here and we see that these two education courses remain. And I said, well, what does that mean? And they said, well, if you take these two courses, then you'll be graduated. And I said, give me that paper. Do you mean to tell me that if I take these two courses, I'm going to get a degree? Because that's the first time it had ever crossed my mind that I would actually graduate, because I didn't have the self-confidence to believe that I could be a college graduate. But that was really a big deal in the little town that I came from. So I took them and I graduated and I became a high school band director. And I wasn't happy as a high school band director. I wanted to be a college band director. So I took a fellowship at Mississippi State. I became the marching band director because he had gone on sabbatical. And I really enjoyed my time there. And when I left, I took I went from the smallest school in Georgia almost to one of the largest. And then I had a 100-piece band. And that was fun. But part of my background, I have a father issue, so I didn't get along with the principal very well. And I just said, this is not going to work. The high school kids are not motivated like college kids. I want to be a college band director. And so Georgia Tech offered me a job to become the band director at the University of Georgia Tech. And I had also applied to go back to college for my doctorate. And so I'd been accepted at the University of Mississippi at Ole Miss. And then this company, the sales company, contacted me. Well, I had a contract for Georgia Tech. The company that offered me the money said, we'll fly you over here. We'll put you up in a hotel. We'll pick you up airport in a limousine. We'll give you a steak dinner. I mean, they really wanted me to come. They're spending a lot of money. And so they offered me 20 times the Georgia Tech salary. So I thought for about 2 seconds and I said, I'll take it. So that's what
the deliberations were short.
So I took it, and that's when they gave me the books, and that's when I started my business career. And since then, I've done a number of things. I'm a true entrepreneur because of the way I was brought up. Like you said, I'm dyslexic. I can't read very well, and problems present themselves all the time. But I've learned to adjust and make decisions and do things, and I've built a number of businesses. And the thing in business is, if you're not having problems today, you better watch out for tomorrow, because tomorrow there's something going to show up. And if it's 2 days, the ones that shows up in 3 days, the ones that show up in 3 days are going to be a lot worse because you had a day off. So
Yeah, you
anyway,
have to stay in fighting form when it comes to running any form of business, because the challenge, we'll never have a challenge-free life. When we talk about manifesting through our abilities, challenges help us learn and grow and help us gain confidence.
exactly. And you mentioned manifesting. This book is a testament to manifestation.
It is. I was noticing that through your story. You're describing what utilizing your own personal energy for a magical manifestation is, by being guided by your ability to, again, take the crossroads presented to you over and over again, and to use your willpower, which is our manifesting ability, to make things happen, even though people are telling you you couldn't.
Yes. I saw this in my mind long before the book came. I used to think one day I'll come in. If you could see my office, these books are scattered all over. I think one day I'll come into my office and these books are going to be everywhere. And they are. It's, well, it's like in Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill says, if you can think it and see it and believe it, it can come true. And so I really believe that. And that's how this book came about, that someone who had terrible skills when it comes to writing put together a book. I sent it to my mentor, the guy that hired me to go into sales. He's 80 something years old. He's one of the most respected businessmen in Tennessee. I mean, they named buildings after him at the University of Tennessee at Martin. He's really a quiet. So I sent him the book and dedicated it to him. He wrote me a 4-page letter telling me how wonderful the book was. And he said, you really got a winner. He said, I had no idea that you had this kind of talent. You know, that's from someone who wrote a book, put it on the market, pulled it off because it was so bad, the change. But if you really put your heart and soul into something, you can make it something good.
Dennis, can you give me a few insights on your feeling about the worth of failure within a journey? Because in my own personal experience and what I see with clients is that the thing is that the obstacles are interpreted as failure sometimes. And if we look at failure as an opportunity to examine what we need to change to make things better, or where we need to redirect our energies so that it can bring us the results that we're hoping for, then it becomes a completely different thing. In spirituality, failure is simply an opportunity to learn and to grow and to examine what you need to change. What's been your experience with failure?
Well, I'm on the same page. Totally agree. In fact, in the back of the book where the quotes are, one of the quotes is, embrace failure because it's your teacher. It's the thing that's going to make you better. It's not an obstacle, it's a stepping stone. So every time that you experience a failure, you look at it and you say, now, what was it that I learned from this that I can use to build and become better? So everybody fails. One of the poems in the book is Casey at the Bat. Do you know that poem?
I do know that poem, but
It's
if
a
you want to share
wonderful
it, please
poem.
feel free.
And there's nothing in it that should be emotional, but when I read it, I cry. And at the end, Casey strikes out.
The mighty Casey has struck out. Yeah.
Yeah. And so why is that in the book? Well, at the end of the poem, I said, why would I put a poem about someone who struck out in a book about motivation and inspiration? It's because that's not the end of the world. He's still playing baseball. There's another game tomorrow. Mm-hmm. Nobody bats 1,000. Mm-hmm. So you just take it. And he was still Casey, and he was still popular. And probably the next day he had a grand slam home run. And that's just how life is. You have to accept failure. You have to accept disappointment. But it's what you take from those things. It's the silver lining in the cloud. It's what you take from those that makes your life better and happier. One of the quotes in the book says, I no longer have problems. I have projects. So if you never look at a problem as a problem, you don't ever have problems. It's just a project. Now, you may be successful in that project and you may fail, but it wasn't a problem. It was just something that you have to deal with.
The other thing that you're describing that is such a key element of being able to succeed, regardless of what circumstances, both exterior or internal, might throw in your direction, is the ability to change. And we live in a world that tells us to fear change because it means that which we like is going away. It does not actually mean that. It just is telling us that nothing is truly permanent and that the key to peace, to happiness, and to success is to accept the need to change and to not resist it. resistance is the thing that so many people, they have a resistance to letting go of that which is not working and changing it to something that is, which is, again, the thing where you wanted to be the drummer, but you couldn't. So you're going to change to the trumpet until the opportunity to be who you want to be comes up for you. And so can you tell me a little bit about your relationship to change? Because it sounds like you've made it a friend, and that is one of the keys to success.
Well, the only constant in the business world is change. It's always going to be, everything's going to change. When I started teaching real estate investing, the things that I taught, this was back in 2005, are pretty much out of date, not relevant anymore, because in 2005, we didn't have these iPhones. We didn't have a Google. I mean, we did, but it wasn't like it is now. We didn't have AI. We didn't have anything. And so as I taught through the years, I realized that if you do a set of slides before you teach the next person, you better go and look at the slides again, because things may have already changed so much. They're changing so fast. Back in that 1989, I started with a large company. It was a Fortune 500 company, and they sent me to train up in Boston, Massachusetts at the AT&T facility. And so I went in there, and there was a certain lab that you couldn't go into. I had access to the entire building because of what I did, but I couldn't go into that lab. And I said, well, what's going on in there? And they said, well, they're doing things with phones that you can't even imagine. Now, this was in 89. No, I mean, if you used the phone, you picked it up, you dialed it or pushed the button or something. That was the only phones there were. I thought, well, what could it be? And I said, when it happens, I'll know. Well, it's happened. My goodness, things that you can just
amazing. Our phones, it's like having a wizard with us everywhere we go. And we're going to tie this back to the idea of daily reading as well, because Stella Gibbons, who wrote Cold Comfort Farm in the 1930s, described what we're doing right now, which is a video call. It's Zoom. And so the imagination fuels creation. And so that is one of the things that daily reading can do, is it feeds your imagination, and from your imagination comes the creation.
Right.
And your willingness to adapt is what we're really talking about with change. The way to stay successful in an ever-changing marketplace with ever-changing ideals and ever-changing desires and ever-changing focuses is to be willing to adapt to the needs of the moment.
Exactly.
And so you're in Boston, it's 1989, the smartphone has been hinted at in a spooky lab in Boston, Massachusetts, which I absolutely love, because you practically envision witches in a cauldron. And what are they doing? They're brewing up the future is what they're doing. And where do we go from there?
Well, from there, I went to work with a large company, and I was doing more than one thing. I've always been, at one time in my life, I was doing 6 things at one time. I was a music director at the church. I was college. I taught music in college. I was doing Amway. I don't remember. There were six different jobs, and I'm that way. I'm hyper. I have to move and do a lot of things. So it was at that point I started writing things down. This must have been around 1975, where I had already been with Henco, and I had read the books, and I was reading more books. I read Psycho-Cybernetics, and I can't remember. There was a bunch of them. They're all listed in the back of this book. One of the great things.
And you're doing all of this reading despite having dyslexia, which is another testament to perseverance.
Yeah. If you have dyslexia, probably some of the people watching are familiar with it, or maybe they have it, or they know someone. Reading is like pushing a wagon uphill, because the letters move around. I mean, that you don't see them moving, but if you're looking at, I'm looking at the word form. Well, I'll look at it, and it may be form when I look at it now. The next time I see it, it may be from, and then that may be something else.
Yeah.
So the concentration required in reading, I have people that work for me that read for me. When I'm doing my email, I'll bring Kathy in and say, we're going to do emails. And so I just pop the email up and she reads it. Because if I read it, I get too tired before I finish. And so now I've replaced reading with, I walk every day for my health.
Yeah.
I listen. And so I spend my morning thinking, well, what I'm going to listen about today, and I'll go to YouTube and pick out two or three things, and I'll save them on my phone, and then I'll walk for an hour or two and listen. And then if one of the things sparks my attention, I'll come back and research it and then read it, and then I'll put it in my reading so that when Kathy comes in the next day, I'll say, here, read this to me. So I've always tried, well, back in when I was the Henco days, when I was driving, I was a salesman and I drove hours and hours and hours every day. I bought cassette tapes and I'd put one cassette tape in and take it out, put another one in. And so that's where I learned about Earl Nightingale and a number of the people. Well, Earl Nightingale's in the book. The people in the book are people that I had learned about over my lifetime, and these stories touched me so much that I thought, I'm going to save these, I don't know, one day. And so when I started teaching, I would use those stories to teach people how to become successful business people or real estate investors. And in the book, it says in one place, the most valuable thing in my life is in this book. I'm giving you everything. It's worth, well, on my spreadsheet that I give to banks, intellectual property, $1.5 million. And I'm not sure that's even enough, because it's more valuable to me than that. And you can have it. You can have it. You couldn't pay someone to read for almost 50 years and save the very best parts and put them in a book. How much what would that cost you? It would be a fortune. And
It would
so,
also take 50 years to do so. And so what you're describing is being an educator and a mentor. And we need to look to the people who have, Dennis is describing overcoming multiple obstacles in his life, including what, with no offense to your father whatsoever, sounds like an emotionally abusive home environment that you had to overcome and carve a path out of. And then you had to overcome a reading disability to get your grades up to the point where you could achieve the thing that really lit up your internal world. But it's not, you never let your light be constant. You let it continue to grow and encompass and illuminate more paths for you. And in your book, you're telling other people how to continue doing that for themselves, which the thing that I'm noticing in your story is, even though it has been varied and there have been many twists and turns in it, is that you have found a way to be happy and peaceful and connected and not bored. Because that causes us to ruminate. When we're not expanding our consciousness and encompassing new things, we have a tendency to start ruminating, gazing over our soldiers, going over the problems, the things that keep you up at 3 o'clock in the morning. And Dennis was a prime candidate to have CPTSD because he came from a household where it could have been carried forward. And so you put together your own treatment methods. So you're absolutely correct. That is invaluable as a tool to just hand to other people within the covers of a book.
right. I agree.
So what about your personal life? Because you seem to have found your way to be happy. Would you describe yourself as a happy person?
Oh, I am very happy. I have a wonderful family, a beautiful wife, and my children are they're gorgeous. The grandchildren are great. I love the grandchildren. Time with them is just, super. We don't spend enough time with them. I love my business. I love getting up and going to work every day. I still work 6 days a week. I say I'm partially retired because I only work 6.5 days a week. you know, because it used to be round the clock. If you love what you're doing, it's really not work.
Mm-hmm.
It's fine. And when I started doing this book, I had to let everything else kind of go, because whatever you focus on is what happens. And the book could have never happened without the focus. So luckily I was in real estate, so I had lots of homes that were rented and notes that were to be paid, and I could step away and it would continue to go. Which, by the way, is a good idea for anybody. I think real estate's a wonderful investment, which I guess life just kind of came around and gave me the time and the inspiration to do this. But I read something one day that said, I was saying, why do some books succeed? That's kind of like Earl Nightingale's question. Earl Nightingale's question in the book was, why am I poor and there's people that are living in these really nice homes? Why are these people living in these tents? He lived in he was so poor that the city had made a tent area for homeless people to live in. And so he was trying to find a book to tell, well, why are some people rich and some people poor? And his whole life was a search for the book, and he finally found it. So my question is, why are some people happy and some people are not? Well, the answer to the question is Abraham Lincoln said, a fellow is about as happy as he makes up his mind to be. So you look at what you have and you're grateful. I call it the G vitamin, grateful. The G vitamin, it lowers your blood pressure, it makes you live longer, it gives you strength to go on. So I think gratitude is the answer to happiness.
Gratitude leads to abundance.
Yeah.
Gratitude leads to abundance. That's one of the sayings within the spiritual community.
Right.
And one of the ways to achieve gratitude is, because people struggle with that when they don't have what they want. They're like, it's hard to be grateful because all I can think about is the house I don't have or the car I'm not driving. A really good tool in understanding gratitude is whatever you are doing right in this moment, examine it for what you would miss about it if it was gone.
Right. Exactly.
And it genuinely will bring your focus to, wait, this is good. This is really super good. I'm ignoring the things that this could be gone tomorrow. And understanding the impermanence of the things that we have, and understanding I would miss this aspect of my life. It was this person, this pet, this place, this time. If it was not here, allows you to focus on what is good about something. So when you're struggling with gratitude, one of the first things you can ask yourself is, in this particular moment, what is around me that I would miss if it were no longer present? And immediately you should be like, that clock, this floor. There are so many different things around us that we overlook because they become commonplace to us because we're too used to them. And that's a really good tool, is asking, what would I miss in this moment if it was gone?
I agree.
I'm sorry to interrupt you on that, sir. Go ahead.
Well, I've had employees that come in and they were just not happy, and had one tell me that God just didn't like them. And his name was Charles. And I said, Charles, God likes you. I said, what about that foot? Do you like your foot? And he said, what do you mean? I said, well, what if somebody took your foot? Would you be happy or unhappy? And what about your hand? You can use your hands. And what about the air? And I just kept naming things, because everything that we have is a gift, that we can think, that we can breathe, that we can talk, that we have friends. It's all things to be grateful for. I have a ritual every morning. The first thing I do is I have a checklist, and the first thing on there is gratitude. I refocus on all the wonderful things that are happening in my life, which gets me off to a pretty good start every day. You know, there's things that you have to face that you wish you didn't have to face, but that's okay because I still have a beautiful wife. I still have a wonderful office, and I have a little dog. I don't know if you can hear him. He's crying. He wants to come in here. And I have I love my dog, and I love to write. I love my book. I love when people buy the book. I check I check it every day. Well, did I get a review? By the way, if you're watching, you do get the book. I really appreciate if you go to Amazon and click on those 5 stars because that really makes my day. So if you like the book and I made your day, then you make my day. Go give me some stars on Amazon and even write a written review if you have time. If
That's
you
called an
like,
energy exchange, and it has value within manifestation as well. You release an energy to make room for a different one.
exactly. So
And I can't hear your dog, but I do understand that, like, all of the things that we have around us flesh out our reality in a beautiful way. All we get is this present moment, and finding what is beautiful within it is one of the keys to happiness. And everything that Dennis is talking about starts from a lifelong habit of expanding his abilities and not being deterred by the things that might have stood in his way. And that is one of the paths towards healing as well. And one of the things that I've been noticing in the path that you are outlining is that you broke a generational trauma cycle before we even had the words to describe a generational trauma cycle. And so we're talking to a pioneer in how to overcome a background and create the world that you would wish to inhabit, that will make you happy, that will make your soul sing. And he wrote a book to try and help you find the path towards your own happiness, your own joy, your own ability to create your own universe, to succeed and to find what you are good at. And it contains the building blocks and the information and the path forward. Dennis, we're running out of time. We're going to have to get going here, but I wanted to thank you so much for joining me. This is Dennis J. Henson. I will drop a link to his book in both the episode notes and in the description box on the video for this particular episode. So I'm going to do the housekeeping really quickly and throw it back to Dennis in just a moment. But if you need to find me, you can find me at therisingmoon.com to book me for a tarot card reading or a life coaching session. And I do focus on a form of tarot that helps people heal. Now, can I do predictive tarot? I can. I much prefer helping people heal so that they can then manifest their own beautiful reality without having to ward off the future with what's going to happen. When you heal, you're not worried about what's coming towards you. You're like, yeah, bring it on. I can take it. And you can also find me at my Patreon. That's going to be linked below. But we're going to go over to Dennis again, and we're going to review his book title, which is The Real Impact Daily Inspirations. This is Dennis J. Henson. That is Henson with an O, Henson. Dennis, are there any other places that people can find you? Are there any other projects that you would like to draw their attention to?
Well, I'm easy to find at dennisjhenson.com. You can find me on Amazon. You can just Google dennisjhenson.com or Dennis J. Henson, and it will come up. I have other books in the process: Real Impact 2, Real Impact 3, and the 7 Secrets of Success. You can probably find the 7 Secrets of Success online if you just search. But they're not the whole book. They're just mentioning the 7 secrets. But it's been so much fun. I can see how people dealing with you can become better because you're very warm and encouraging, and that means a lot, especially when people are going through hard times. So I can see why you're successful.
Well, thank you. That is incredibly kind of you to say. And it was incredibly kind of you to give us your time today. Guys, I really am recommending that you check this out, because overcoming our adversity is the first key to opening the door to the life that you want to lead, the life that you are meant to lead. We are not defined by the bad things that happen to us. We can be impeded by them, and we may have to heal from them, but there is always a path out of our pain towards the life that the people we started out to be before trauma or difficulty or difficult economic circumstances began to define our lives. And Dennis J. Henson is one of the people who has put the words to the paper that will help you find your roadmap out of your own pain. This has been Logical Magic, examining esoterica. Hey guys, thanks so much for joining me. Heal, and you will be able to manifest the life that you hope for. Take care. Be well.